You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. This is episode 127. I'm your co-host, Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who is so awesome, I can't even describe him. Mark, how you doing?
The worst intro ever.
It's the best
and
intro
also
ever.
the best.
It's the best.
And the best intro ever. It was the worst of intros. It was the best of intros. Let's just be fair. It was just an intro. Anyhow, I'm good. And how are you?
I'm also good, which is very coincidental. It's been a busy Star Wars week.
Wow.
And we've got
What a
loads to talk
surprise.
about, haven't we? I know. Insert audio. No, it's been bonkers this week.
Yeah.
Obviously, finale of Book of Boba Fett Season 1. Maybe the last episode ever. We won't know until they announce a Season 2, but as it stands, I think there's going to be a Season 2. And then they announce Kenobi, and then there's casting announcements, and then Hasbro release a load of stuff. I don't know how we're going to fit it all in, but we're going to try our best.
Well then, in that case, what have you had through this week?
What have I had? Well, whatever I have, it's not in front of me. I usually leave it downstairs, and I must have put it upstairs. Apart from a pair of new Adidas flip-flops, which are looking me in the eye.
Nice.
It's been a quiet one. What about you?
I had my 50th anniversary Power Force 2 Senatorial Princess Leia figure. I picked up a Gonk droid, which I seem to have not had before on Vintage Card as well. And I think the main one is the 50th anniversary Lucasfilm Clone Wars figures. There's something about, I don't know about the printing on the card or something, but the actual cards themselves just look lovely. It's a vintage card, so it's always going to work for me. I just looked at them and went, wow, these just look really, really nice. So I'm really stoked I got that. I also had a little lesson from being hasty and not reading a description of a product. Have you seen these little collectible, and I say little because they are only about 1.5 inches big, little metal Star Wars lunchboxes?
You know, I haven't. I've not seen those. They sound fascinating. Tell me more.
So they're kind of more like the, the American metal tinned kind of like lunchboxes that we get. They're miniature. So there's meant to be a Series 1 collection. I can't remember who puts them out because I actually threw the package away because I was so interested to see them. But they're basically a blind box. So you just pick up a box, you don't know which one you're going to get. And we've got various different designs on them, normally kind of images from the original trilogy. So when I ordered it on Zavvi, it was reduced from $14.99 to $3.99. And it kind of said, Series 1 Star Wars collectible lunchboxes. And I thought to myself, that's quite a markdown. So these clearly haven't been popular. But if I'm going to get the whole of Series 1 for $3.99, plus maybe a little bit of postage, that's amazing. And of course, a little box turns up with only one in it. So I opened it up and I went, well, this is quite cute. It's kind of like a Return of the Jedi motif. On one side, you've got Jabba the Hutt, which I think if it was a full-size lunchbox would just remind me to not eat so much at lunch. And the other side is, it's the final scene really of Luke versus Vader when Vader's kind of on the catwalk and Luke's kind of standing over him. And what's really cool is they still include a little flask, which is basically a rubber. So I think it's like more like a pencil topper. But I kind of thought to myself, I was like, for $3.99, I'm quite happy with that. But I can understand why they haven't clearly been selling, because for 14 quid or 15 quid, that's quite expensive. But I was a little bit bummed that I only got the one. So now I'm thinking, do I get the rest of the set? And I think I might have to.
It sounds like a completist nightmare. It's because they're blind boxes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I might have a quick scour on eBay and see if they're listed as individual items and for a similar price. 15 quid. That's just the price of almost like a hardcover. I think probably the most important thing, and I don't know if you've had an email about it, but I had an email and my Razor Crest is finally making its way. It's been dispatched. It's in the care of the Royal Mail, and it should be with me by the time this episode gets released on Tuesday.
That's very cool. I've not had notification yet. Mine's coming from Zavvi as well, so I've not heard. But then I'm further north than you, so maybe it's different delivery depots and such. It's coming from
possibly.
A different place.
Yeah.
Literally no idea where I'm going to put it. I mean, I've seen pictures online of people unboxing them, and I think 90% sure I am going to open it. that really does look nice.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've been very much a staunch and right. I'm keeping it mint in box, but then I have seen some of these photos, especially of it when it's out and it's on the display base, and I'm thinking, might be tempted. In something that's slightly reassuring, at least for me, because obviously about the size issue, is that somebody did a comparison compared to the size of a katana, the Jabba the Hutt sail barge that the HasLab put out a couple of years before, and it's probably only about half the size of that in length anyway. So that kind of made me feel a little bit more reassured that I might be able to stick it somewhere that I could then pile more collectibles on top and it wouldn't dominate the room too much. So there's hope yet, anyway.
Hope is good.
It is.
Hey, this is Daniel Jose Older, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
We did our final, for now, episode of Making Tracks Reaction Chats. We spoke about Chapter 7 of Season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett, In the Name of Honor. Really enjoyed chewing that over. But that means that section of the podcast is finished for now until 25th of May, when Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen return to their signature roles of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker in Obi-Wan Kenobi lands on Disney Plus on Star Wars Day, and I will stand by that quote.
I'm with you on that one, buddy. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Star Wars Day, 25th of May. The thing that really got me buzzed was that poster. The first time we've seen Ewan in the character of Obi-Wan. Once again, since, when did he actually film that thing? 2003? Maybe pickups in 2004? So you're talking 17 years at the nearest since he was sort of kitted up in that clothing. And there he is walking along the desert sands. What did you make of that, landing on the day that we got the finale of Book of Boba Fett as well?
I was almost thinking they might have done a teaser, perhaps, like either to actually come on the back end of the finale of the Book of Boba Fett, or just something that just drops online, at some point during the day. But maybe again, that's possibly taking the focus a little bit away from the finale. I think this was all announced on the shareholders' call for the last quarter's earnings from Disney. So this is probably again one of those things that we do see with Disney. More often than not, is actually the announcement isn't necessarily for the fans per se. It's more to kind of reassure the shareholders and make sure that the stock keeps on climbing in the right direction for the shareholders and stuff. But the artwork is lovely. It's a lovely colour scheme. It's almost iconic as the episode 1 teaser poster. That's how iconic I think this looks. With
little Anakin and the Shadow of Vader against the wall. Yeah.
Pretty much.
That. I totally get that. Yeah, it is. It's going to be right up there, isn't it? One question I've got for you, though, is I get why they did it, and it's exactly what you just said. Shareholders meeting, which kind of went under the radar this week. It did feel a little bit like it stole the thunder of that final chapter of Book of Boba Fett, because this is a huge announcement. Getting news of this is what's next makes sense for the wider Star Wars community. But we didn't get that post-credit thing that a lot of people hoped for, I think is fair.
Yeah.
We got the Cobb Vanth thing, which a lot of people, myself included, think that Cobb Vanth moment could potentially set up Vanth. I don't think as Daimyo of Mos Espa, you kind of assume that Cara Dune has moved out of the storyline now, that he could become the Marshal that becomes the focus of Rangers of the New Republic. That's my thought anyway, and that they're teasing other things. But to put a Kenobi sequence in there would confuse people, because if they put that at the end, they'll go, hang on, this is set after Return of the Jedi. Isn't Obi-Wan Kenobi dead? And they could confuse people. So I get why they didn't put it on. Yeah. What do you think of that? It stole the thunder a little bit, didn't it?
Well, for me, it didn't. I didn't see it until the next morning, because I think it dropped about, was it 9 or 10 o'clock at night?
Oh, it was.
For us, really, we had seen the finale. I'd already started talking to people about it. We had chatted and recorded that episode of Reaction Chat, and I'd gone to bed. So I woke up next morning and I was like, oh, that's amazing, great. And then Sunny went, oh yeah, 25th of May, so that's going to be like, what, the 44th anniversary year from the first time we saw Obi-Wan Kenobi? 45th, there you go. Yeah. I can't do math. So 45th anniversary. So that in itself is quite cool. So kind of maybe see why they went with that date rather than maybe May the 4th. Don't know. To kind of go back to your kind of speculations, it's a good shout about Cobb Vanth, actually. I kind of think there's a reason and a significance to show him that beyond the fact that he's still alive. And I think you wouldn't put somebody in the Bacta tank and show them as the last thing you see of this series unless it had a greater importance for the rest of the Mandoverse, shall we say. And actually, but it's a good shout about Cara Dune. I hadn't thought necessarily on that angle, but you are quite right. There is potentially a way that actually they could adjust things, and maybe we could still get a Rangers of the New Republic in some shape, way, or form with Cobb Vanth rather than Cara Dune.
They did bring those the two X-Wing pilots back in Chapter 5 when Mando's up in the N1, just to sort of remind you that these Rangers, these New Republic guys, are still flying around the rim and checking on stuff and seeing what's going on. So yeah, it does feel like maybe there's some potential there.
Hello, my name is Aidan Cook, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The HBO series Rome, which ran for a couple of seasons, turned out to be a fertile breeding ground for Star Wars actors. Guy Henry, Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, was in Rome. Lindsay Duncan had already been in The Phantom Menace as the voice of TC-14. Indira Varma's upcoming in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And now Ray Stevenson, who people will know from The Punisher and playing Volstagg in the Thor movies, various other roles around and about, is joining the cast of Ahsoka as an admiral, not Thrawn, but an Imperial Admiral. Very interesting casting. He's a big guy. He's an imposing presence on set. He has been in Star Wars before. He was the voice of Gar Saxon in Rebels and Clone Wars, so it's not his first time in the Star Wars galaxy. But what do you make of this? It seems to be an interesting addition to the cast.
Yeah, he plays some relatively edgy characters, a bit rough around the edges and that. And so, you could see him playing some kind of dirty, underhanded Imperial Admiral, by all means, somebody who's battle-worn after the fall of the Empire. And so that could be interesting. Obviously, the first Admiral that I think of after Thrawn, and especially in relation to Thrawn, is Pelion.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know, based on obviously the characterization that we've seen in the books, whether or not that would be a good match, albeit that might be an interesting take to, and a different road to take. And maybe he could play Pelion, which would be fantastic. Because again, it's another EU Legends character kind of coming back into the canon, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, Pelion was always sort of Dr. Watson to Thrawn's Sherlock Holmes, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So, and as a character, as a physical presence, always seemed very similar. The two sort of silhouettes of the two characters, it very much felt like that was the road that Zahn had taken with those characters. But yeah, I think in this era, because things have tweaked and changed, and we've already met Thrawn as a character in Rebels, the return of him earlier in the timeline in this iteration than the previous one. I mean, this is assuming Ahsoka takes place at the same time as The Mandalorian. Now, that's a big assumption because, we can't assume that all of it takes place at the same time. But if it does for the bulk of it, you're sort of 5 years after Jedi, which is where Heir to the Empire was. So you're bringing Thrawn into the live-action world in the same time period. I know it's a very different version of the Star Wars galaxy, but when you did with Heir to the Empire, and now he's a character with tenure in the fans' hearts and minds, as well as the galaxy itself is a known entity. So it's going to be very interesting to see if that's the role that Ray Stevenson's character plays, because, like I say, he was in Vikings, big guy.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of admiral. We assume he's an ally of Thrawn if he's playing an admiral, but it's fractured, isn't it, the Empire? There could be warring factions of Imperial fragments, different elements that are going at each other, like happened in the EU back in the day.
Yeah, with the warlords and stuff, like warlords.
Exactly.
And that, yeah.
Zins, that's right. So it could be interesting to see if he's maybe one of those kind of characters. But just good to see that apparently they start shooting it in April, so we're not that far away from production beginning on Ahsoka. So it'd be very interesting to see what news drips out, what other castings come out, because as we move beyond Book of Boba Fett, we've still got Bad Batch to come. There was a piece on Fantha from Spring Fair where White House, one of the licensees, had a banner up that said Season 3 Mandalorian coming autumn, winter, very publicly on show. So now you can kind of assume that the licensees know that Mando's coming this year, so that's going to be hitting. So we've got a lot of stuff coming this year, but also a lot of other stuff in production as well. So it'd be interesting to see what news we get from Ahsoka.
Absolutely, and that would almost make sense. You open up 2022 with the Book of Boba Fett, and then like your next quarter is Kenobi, Bad Batch after that, which runs for a longer period anyway, and then Mandalorian Season 3, and it all kind of works perfectly, and so it doesn't necessarily feel like we're being overloaded, but there's a nice steady stream, and steady stream of Star Wars is perfect.
It is, and Andor, you forget Andor as well, and
of course,
Stellan Skarsgård, who's one of the actors in the show, he has gone on record saying he understands there's going to be a Season 2 of Andor, so it's all starting to build in a good sense in terms of long-term storytelling, which I think Book of Boba Fett really does feel like the start of a big chunk of long-term storytelling, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The Book of Boba Fett, on one hand, it's the first book of a long-running, ongoing like saga. You think of something like, Game of Thrones, which was like 7 or 8 books, and Harry Potter, 7 or 8 books and all that. But it's quite possible, and I think the start of the Book of Boba Fett story for the new era, shall we say, has to really address what it did in the series, which is obviously between when he was swallowed up by the Sarlacc and how he gets to where he is. I think they've had to maybe, on some level, do the kind of grunt work, as it were, and kind of get that out there so everybody's kind of satisfied and caught up and on the same page. But then, they brought in a number of new characters into that series that hopefully will just tie into the larger Star Wars universe and then continue on with Boba Fett in the next few series. So I think it's quite exciting, regardless of when it comes and what have you. It's fantastic.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
last Wednesday brought us Hasbro Fan First Wednesday, believe it or not. Loads of new releases from the Black Series and the Vintage Collection. And I thought, Mr. Mulcaster, it might not be a bad idea to have a little roll through what they've announced, what's coming, and get your thoughts on them. So from the Archive Collection, Black Series 6-inch, really nice as a C-3PO figure from A New Hope. Looks absolutely gorgeous. Lando in his skiff gear. Dengar, as you saw him in The Empire Strikes Back. And Emperor Palpatine looking rather menacing. What do you make of these Archive figures?
Yeah, they look cool. It always makes me chuckle when I see a Lando Calrissian skiff guard figure, because for some reason, back in the day when I was 5 or 6 and we were given loads of vintage figures, I ended up with an absolute shed ton of these Lando skiff guards. Like, ridiculous amount. None of them had weapons. Most of them didn't have helmets. And it's just like, it was like I had a little army of Lando. So there's always that kind of nostalgia thing. You are right. The C-3PO figure looks lovely. I don't tend to pick up any of the Archive figures. Just don't really have a huge amount of space for 6-inch. And I think that these figures are great for those who have missed them. It's good to see that people get a chance to pick these up again without having to break the bank.
Absolutely true. They're available at most major retailers in the US, Canada and the UK, including Hasbro Pulse. They're already available now to pre-order and they're on shelves in the autumn of 2022. Over to the Gaming Greats series. There's the Gaming Greats Night Brother Archer figure from Fallen Order. This character looks badass. What do you make of this one?
I will be 110% honest. When I was playing Jedi Fallen Order, these guys actually made me jump.
Really?
Yeah, I can remember playing that level at night. The whole house was completely deserted because like Cam was out with the boys. So I was like, get a bit of great gaming time. And so it's down there, lights off, just playing it. And they hopped out and they actually made me crap my pants. So yes, they do look awesome. I do like the Gaming Greats. They are quite fun. I will probably get one. I might put them in a corner facing the wall just so I don't have to look at him. Definitely going to get picked up at some point.
Excellent. I like the thought that they're making you crap your pants.
Yeah.
Available at GameStop in the US and Canada. It's a fan channel exclusive in the UK. Already available to pre-order right now if there's any left. And that's on shelves autumn of 2022 as well. And then we get to the Vintage Collection. There's a Clone Trooper 501st Legion figure, which fits in very nicely with sequences we saw in flashbacks in Chapter 6 of the Book of Boba Fett. And then the real big daddy, it's the Vintage Collection Boba Fett's Throne Room playset. It's $229.99. It's coming summer 2023, which basically means it's going to be 230 quid in the UK. Don't know where it's coming to us here at this point. Most likely through Hasbro Pulse.
Yeah.
Absolutely looks phenomenal. The detail, the amount of accessories you get, I think there's 50 accessories. That's available on Pulse in the US, UK and Canada. Up for pre-order right now. Summer of 2023. Same question, mate. What do you make of that?
I mean, this is definitely when you start thinking, do I just buy this and then get the extension so I can break this out? Because this looks amazing. And to be fair, you don't really need any other figures other than like a Boba Fett figure from Book of Boba Fett sitting on that throne and maybe a Fennec Shand in the background, and you're done. It just works. It's awesome. It's really nice to see how many bits and bobs and trinkets and stuff that comes with the kind of throne room. You kind of get that Ronto spit roaster, rugs and tables and lamps and stuff. It must be like a diorama's builder's wet dream to get something like this.
The detail is incredible. There was a little video that they played and the amount of accessories, as you say. And just what I'd really want to know is what access did they have to the archives to get the depth and detail? Because when they showed the video, there was angles that you saw of that throne room that you never saw, obviously, in the films. Maybe you'll see them if we go back there in future episodes of Book of Boba or maybe Mando, or who knows, it's there now as an asset they can use. But I was just really, really impressed with this. There was also some pipeline reveals from the Vintage Collection, Episode 2 Anakin Skywalker, Mandalorian Commando from Season 7 of the Clone Wars, and then some more Archive, Force Awakens Han Solo, New Hope Chewbacca, New Hope Grand Moff Tarkin, Return of the Jedi, Leia, Boushh, and then finally from the Black Series, pipeline reveals, Attack of the Clones, Aayla Secura, Clone Wars Season 7, Darth Maul, and Rogue One Saw Gerrera. So loads and loads of stuff there revealed by Hasbro.
It's a nice haul, I reckon, and I think the only thing missing from that Jabba's throne room is a nice, stonking, great big HasLab Rancor, which we won't mention.
We won't mention that, but we will mention that Making Tracks will be joined on the Fantha Tracks Radio Network later this year by a collecting podcast. We're not revealing the name of it yet. We're not revealing the host of it yet. We're very, very much looking forward to the show coming on board because it's a person that we appreciate and admire very much. He's going to be part of the podcast network here. So more news on that as it comes. All that kind of news from later in the spring going forward will be found on our new collecting podcast, and more details on that later. And we promise we won't keep you waiting 2 years like we have with Start Your Engines.
Fantha Tracks. Hoodoo!
Great news for soundtrack lovers. Music from Rogue One by Michael Giacchino is coming out. It's an expanded edition. It's very much in the vein of the Solo expanded edition. Seems crazy we've had to wait so long for Rogue One, which is 2 years older than Solo. But I ain't complaining. It's up on all digital streaming platforms. There's 57 tracks, including obviously the new music and alternate takes. For people like us who listen to this music regularly, and not that the existing Rogue One soundtrack isn't fantastic, this will more than likely usurp that because all this new music that's just going to take us back to Rogue One. How pleased were you to see this? I was personally stoked.
Yeah, I was really chuffed. I don't think we get enough of these expanded soundtracks, if I'm honest.
Agreed.
You know, I mean, and what is great is that obviously they're going to be on digital, which means I can just kind of stream them from Spotify at work. But I would love just to add that physical copy to my collection along next to the Phantom Menace one, which I think is the only one we've actually had in physical, isn't it? You're going all the way back
Sith edition, 2001, I think that was.
I think it was. Looking at the tracks, looks to be in a similar kind of vein. The music's cues from the film. I'm pretty sure you just kind of hit play on track 1, and then by the time you get to possibly track 50, 51, something like that, then you've kind of almost got all the music from the film, and then you've got some alternate takes and endings and stuff, so that'll be interesting to kind of listen to, especially the Virgin Ursa and Hope Suite. That should be quite a nice one. That's quite long, actually. Some of these cues are fairly short in the grand scheme of things, 59 seconds for News from Ashes. Cassian's Prison is only 19 seconds long, so, that could be a ringtone right there, so, so lots of possibilities with that, but it's always great, and I'm really pleased that both Solo and Rogue One haven't got forgotten about in the grand scheme of things, that they're still present and people are still thinking about ways to milk that puppy a little bit and kind of put out new content for it, so it's fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think because we're moving forward, there's so much Star Wars content now, because live action stuff on the telly, we know we've got Bad Batch coming, all the other things that are happening, what's the next movie going to be, and the High Republic expanding, all that news on This Week in Star Wars this week, and the High Republic show with all new releases coming later into 2022. I think Solo and Rogue One in another galaxy, another time, would be so much more expanded upon, so much more delved into. We'd have a lot more background on a lot more characters, certainly a lot more figures from Hasbro, because there were so many background characters. You think, especially Rogue One, which was very much made to sort of butt up against A New Hope, and from very much the same DNA. And you look at Star Wars, again, it's a different world, but you look at Star Wars, all the background characters pretty much, apart from maybe the Tonica sisters, they've been turned into figures at some point. And Rogue One has so many background characters that you think all these characters would have been expanded. So it's really nice, like you say, to see Rogue One get the love 5+ years after it came out. Wonderful.
I'm Brian Herring, BB-8 puppeteer, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. That'll learn you.
John Williams, the maestro behind the music of Star Wars, has turned 90 this past week. Incredible that he's still so productive, still so active. We've got more Indiana Jones music coming from Williams. We seem to get Star Wars music popping into different things from him here, there, and everywhere. So he's still very much a part of the music scene, and definitely a part of the Star Wars galaxy.
It's kind of a soundtrack of my youth, and I'm sure a lot of people kind of think that. You think of all those films that he conducted and wrote scores for throughout the years. Those kind of things are really important, and they kind of create a texture, and he has a sound that I think modern composers, some try to emulate, others try to kind of surpass, but no one gets close. And I think it's fantastic. And the fact that actually, they've just released a new album where he conducts for Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, I think that's fantastic. And the fact that it's a double CD and you can get it on vinyl as well makes it doubly cool.
And also what you say about the evolution of his music is very true, because Jaws feels like a thing on its own, but, Star Wars, Close Encounters, very sweeping elements into both of them. Star Wars is very brass heavy, got a lot of heft and thump, a lot of clarinets and oboes in there, and then you move through to Empire. It feels like a more expansive score. You get to sort of 2001 Philosopher's Stone, 2002 Attack of the Clones, AI. They do very much have a tone. There's a feel to them that feels connected. It's almost like he was going through a phase of music writing, and you can almost connect the vibe of those scores together, even though they sit in completely separate genres. You look at Raiders, and that's got that heavy again with the brass, and there's so many textures and layers to his music. And then you come right up to relatively to the present, Force Awakens, Last Jedi. I absolutely love the Rise of Skywalker score. I think it's a brilliant score. And I'm so stoked because whilst I enjoy Crystal Skull as a film, and I will defend that film because I think it's a great, enjoyable action film, the score doesn't stand up to the other 3 scores. I'm just so excited to see what he does with the music for Indy 5. And please, can we have a title for Indy 5 soon? Because I just feel like, because he's so motif heavy and so motif strong, I'm sure there must be and it's a very welcome thing to be able to do, to fall back on your own motifs. What I liked about some of his later scores that were in genres that he'd written a lot of music for before was that he didn't tend to do that too much. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like watching a Bond film. You know all about this. You hear the Bond film. I'll give you a great example. GoldenEye. You don't hear the da-da-da-da-da-da in GoldenEye until he's smashing that statue down in the tank halfway through the film.
Yeah.
And they just waited for that moment to throw that music in, and it had so much more impact. And I think Williams is a genius in that he judiciously chooses when he's going to drop in the Force theme or he's going to drop in the Imperial March or whatever. It's just always well timed. I'm thrilled that he's still with us. To think at this point of life that we've still got Lucas, we've still got Ford, we've still got Williams. We're very lucky to have these guys with us. 90 years old and still knocking out music. That's incredible.
And what's interesting, actually, especially with the sound of Star Wars, in particular the TV shows, the animations aside, I think Kevin kind of does like an absolutely amazing job, because he does fuse a lot more of Williams' kind of music into the Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch. But obviously, like the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, they really have their own distinct vibe. Do you think that if given the chance, John Williams would be able to have scored something better for Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian, or do you reckon that the tone of those kind of series kind of work perfectly for what they're trying to achieve?
That's a really great question. I mean, it's very difficult to argue that you think he couldn't do something better because it's John Williams. I mean, 52 Oscar nominations, only won 5. That's ludicrous that he only won 5. I think one of the smartest choices they made with initially Mando and later Book of Boba Fett was to go, yeah, we could probably ask John to do the main theme, like he did the main theme for Solo. We could probably ask John to do the main theme for The Mandalorian and then get some guy in who's very much of that ilk to riff off and do music that feels like it's John Williams. But at some point, John Williams isn't going to be around anymore, and we've got to move beyond that. It kind of goes back to our conversation last week about doing a CGI Mark Hamill to play Luke. When do you get to a point where do you wait till the technique's perfected and that's all Luke will ever look like, and you aged the CGI appropriately until it matches Force Awakens? Or do you just go, right, we need to recast this because Star Wars ain't going anywhere. Star Wars is going to be around in 50. It's out going to outlive us both. And maybe we will move beyond the sequels and keep pushing forward, heading along in a timeline. But maybe we will always keep dipping back into the OT and back to the Clone Wars. Who knows? So at some point, Star Wars has to move beyond that, doesn't it? And it can't always just lean on Macquarie designs. It can't always lean on Williams' music. It's got to move into its own thing, because Star Wars is completely its own thing anyway. I think you're always going to reference that. But I think the smart thing they did was, they went down a different route. Now, I look at something like Solo, the score to Solo, John Powell's score, which is my favourite Star Wars score since Phantom Menace.
Okay.
And if I'm honest, I don't think John Williams could have done... I know John Williams worked on The Adventures of Han, that opening music that you hear, that is a Williams composition. But the rest of it is John Powell, and I don't think Williams could have done a better job than John Powell. So he's the guy I want to hear again more than anyone. That soundtrack is just pristine to me. I adore that soundtrack. And what John Powell did that Williams has always done brilliantly, and Spielberg said this, Spielberg's like, my films are a huge percentage less without John's music, and I can listen to John's music and still feel the film. Spielberg and Williams are just the perfect marriage.
Yeah.
Lucas got lucky that Spielberg said, hey, you should use this guy I just used on Jaws. Williams does that so well in that you can listen to the score to Return of the Jedi, for example. And we've lived with this music for 40 years, but, you can listen to Jedi and you know exactly where you are in the film. But if you watch Jedi and turn off John Williams' music, I can't imagine anybody else's music dropping into that spot. They did a good thing by not having Williams' style of music in the TV shows that we've got on at the moment. Of all the ones that are coming, I think Andor will be the one that feels like it needs a bold and brassy OT feel, big orchestra moments. Andor feels to me like that needs that kind of music. My gut tells me they may go down a slightly different path. We'll find out later this year.
Well, I think that is all we have time for this week. If you would like to send us a listener's question, or a comment, or a fan theory, a complaint, either about me, about Mark, or about Star Wars in general, you're more than welcome. Mark, can you let the good listeners know how they can get in touch?
I can. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. And that's me done for this episode.
It is indeed. So until next week, thank you very much for listening. We do appreciate it. Take care. And just remember, always let the Wookiee win.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.